Okay, so this briefing, again, it's going to be for both entry-level folks who are applying to work for OSI who never had investigative experience, and for our experienced agents who maybe are trying to lateral over from another agency. And so I'm going to try and cover all of those things in this briefing. If you feel as though it's not kind of covering what you're interested in, just hang tight and I should get to it. I do touch on each of those things. So we're going to talk about internships, entry-level program, and our experienced agent program. So a little bit about our mission. We are the federal law enforcement agency for the Air Force and for the Space Force. So we do everything for them in terms of felony level investigations, counterintelligence. We do large fraud acquisition investigations. We do SAP security, as well as a number of specialties. We have cyber, polygraph, we have forensics, we have violent crime specialists, kind of across the board. So it's full spectrum in the sense that we're most similar to the FBI and what the FBI does for the US, we do for the Air Force and Space Force. We do it with a mixture of military members, civilians. The military members are both active duty and reserve special agents. So just in a national context, so you can kind of understand where OSI fits in the whole scheme of things. In terms of law enforcement agencies across the nation, right? There's about 18,000, so we're part of that. We're a law enforcement agency. We're a federal law enforcement agency, so there's about 99 of those. We are in the intelligence community because we provide counterintelligence for the Air Force and Space Force, so we're one of those agencies. And we're one of 3 agencies that do law enforcement and counterintelligence in terms of having those authorities. The other 2 are NCIS and the FBI. So we're kind of a small group there. And then we're the only agency, like I said earlier, that do this mission with the military and civilian workforce. So the other agency that's kind of catching up with us, I'm sure I might have a few CID agents on the line. CID is inching towards this in terms of having a lot more civilian agents. In terms of organization, we are worldwide. So anywhere there is a Space Force base, there is an Air Force base, we are located, plus additional locations. So we're at a number of embassies providing force protection information to transiting forces. We work with the FBI in terms of Joint Terrorism Task Force and Counterintelligence Task Force. And you can see here that we have about 3,600 personnel. And that's across 11 regions. So there are a lot of locations. So if you're interested in going overseas, OSI is a good place to be. So these are one of my questions for my entry-level folks. So we often get, how can I use my degree in OSI? And so I like to throw this slide in here just to kind of talk through how you feel you might fit into law enforcement, because some people think, you know, and it's a misconception, right, that you need to be a criminal justice major, you need to be, you know, gung-ho law enforcement type. That is not the case. We are looking for people with all kinds of different degrees, different interests, because law enforcement is across all of those different interests. So just some examples in terms of like maybe say you have a degree in cyber or cybersecurity. We have obviously our cyber mission, but also you can work in counterintelligence. You can work in digital forensics. You can work in proactive criminal investigations. If you have a degree in international relations, global security, intelligence studies, you can work counterintelligence, JTTF, force protection. You can work in our counterintelligence mission kind of across the board in the various areas. If you have a degree in business or accounting, we need your skills in our fraud cases. Some of those are very complex, kind of touching lots of different parts of classified world and unclassified world and all the things that the Air Force Space Force does. And we need people with a mind for that kind of thing. As well as psychology, law, criminal justice, forensics, right? There's a place for you too. We have violent crimes investigators, typical criminal investigations, doing that for the Air Force. We need crime scene techs, people who are specialized in that, as well as people who can execute polygraph exams within our agency. So we have people with all different degrees, and I have seen all different degrees. I even met an agent a few years ago with a degree in zoology. So all of those things can be applied to investigations. In terms of training, we have our training academy down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We participate in the Criminal Investigative Training Program, which is a program that all special agents go to, and you get certified to be an 1811. So that is across the board, and that's about 11 weeks. And then we have a follow-on program where you learn primarily the OSI things you would need to know. So we're talking about UCMJ, any counterintelligence type thing, report writing, how to use our databases, some advanced training in terms of source operations and undercover we'll cover in our basic. So if you are brand new, you would go through the full 19 weeks of training for us. If you are coming from another agency, you likely would just attend the add-on course. If you are a retiring or separating OSI special agent, we even have a shorter course where you could go, there's an online version, we call it distance learning, where you can kind of catch up on the most recent things maybe that have happened since you left the agency. Most specifically, the indexing that we do and we're very serious about. We want to make sure everyone has the correct training. So we have the right kind of training for you, whether you come in as entry level or lateral from another agency. Once you're in the agency, we have continuous training as well as an 18-month probationary period. If you are brand new, you'll go through that 18-month probationary period. If you are lateraling from another agency, you will have to go through an abbreviated version just to sign off that you're able to do all of the things that OSI needs you to do in terms of investigating. So sometimes that can be abbreviated, but it will depend on kind of what's going on at your detachment and who is there to help you get off probation. All right, so to the best part. So our 1811 recruiting program. So we do hire civilian agents in 4 different ways. There's so many different ways. I don't know if I should list all of them, but the #1 way, right, is experienced agents. So these are called our journeyman agents. You're coming in as a GS-13, meaning you are plug and play. You've been to training, whether with OSI or with another agency. We just have to give you a little bit of the OSI-ism, and you could go out there and run cases and do what you need to do without significant training. So the second way is our entry-level program that we participate in through the Air Force, and it's called Palace Acquire. So big Air Force actually has this fantastic program called Palace Acquire, where they bring in people right out of college and get them into the career fields that need them the most. And so we participate in it just like the history office and the intelligence office. So we bring in, I think it is about 15 agents per year right out of college. We'll train you to be an agent and we'll place you in a position. Now, OSI will hire people on entry level outside of the PAC program, and that's the OSI developmental program. That's the 3rd one there on the list. And we can hire anywhere between a 7 and a 12 for that program. So that means if you want to come in entry level and you have no OSI training at all or no agent training at all, and are interested in being an agent, maybe you didn't apply to the PAC program, you can apply to this and we can place you anywhere between a GL7 and GL12, GS12 in terms of locations in our agency based on your experience. So let's say you're working as a GS10 CBP officer and you apply, we can likely bring you on at a higher grade than a 7 and hopefully bring you on a similar grade that you are now. So it just gives us that flexibility. Typically, we'll look at where you're working now, what your SF50 looks like, and that will help us determine how we can bring you on. The last program that we use is the Premier College Intern Program. This is also a big Air Force program where we can bring on interns for a 10-week session in the summer. So our interns will come on as GS5s. They'll be at our certain locations within OSI, typically all within the United States, big locations where you can get lots of experience and shadow our agents. This program is, I would say, pretty popular. We just advertised for it in September, both the PAC program and the PSIP program. And that's because we have to go through the rigorous vetting process of our suitability investigations before bringing you on in the spring. So we try and line it up with your graduation and or summer break between college years. And I'll talk about that suitability investigation soon. So a little bit about our hiring process. And this is just kind of some go by, right? As we all know, things change and here and there. But typically for OSI, this is how it will go. We will look across the board in terms of where do we have holes and how do we ID what we need to hire. And typically we're tracking all of our empty billets. We know ones that are going to come empty because of retirements or people just leaving, going to other agencies. So we'll ID the billets that are going to be open. And then we'll post that on USA Jobs, where we only use USA Jobs at this time. And maybe if you're familiar with us in the past, we've used other methods, but right now you will only find our jobs on USA Jobs. So apply, fill out the questionnaire, attach your resume, make sure you have your SF50 from where you're working now, make sure you have your veterans preference if you have that, and upload everything that is listed in the vacancy announcement. So if it asks for college transcripts for entry level, attach that. That is one of the #1 ways people get knocked out of the process early, is that they just haven't attached all the right documents. So as our HR folks are going through the system and they're checking to see if you're qualified for the job, if the attachments are there or the requested documents are there, they'll mark you ineligible. So just have those ready to upload. And let me just, one more thing with the college transcripts. We have noticed if you upload a transcript that maybe you just screenshotted online, just make sure that it has the date that the degree was conferred. So we want to see on the transcripts that you did get the degree and that you haven't just completed the classes. And that's important for the people trying to qualify for the job based on your education. So at the GS7, 9 level. Okay, so then your application goes through the initial screening. Like I talked about, just basic qualifications. Are you qualified for the job that we advertised? If it's a GS13, you know, do you have the right number of weeks as a GS12 to be eligible for a 13? You know, are you a U.S. citizen? You know, have you answered all of the questionnaire questions that we put in there? Have you uploaded all the transcripts and all of the documents we asked for? So they'll do that in the initial screening. Then we'll do a resume review where we're going to look at your resume. If you've made it through those portions, we'll then contact you for an interview. So our interviewing is done through HireView. It is a software platform where we can email you and say, hey, congratulations, we like you, we'd like you to interview for one of our positions, and here's a link. So you can pre-record your interview based on the questions that will pop up in front of you, and then submit it to our panel of agents who then give it a score. We actually went to this program last year and had great feedback in terms of being able to record your interviews at any time, anywhere, right? Like not having to fly into an office or having to take a day off work to do interviews, as well as internally for us, we can get more people who are available to score our interviews and have that good panel of agents available to do that. So then if you make it past that, I'm sorry, typically at the same time you do your interview, you'll get a link to complete the psychological testing. And that is all done online as well. So you'll have to complete both of those things to move on to the next stage. So if you've successfully completed the interview and the psychological testing and you've passed that, we'll then contact you to tentatively match you with a location. And so typically what that looks like is we'll go into USA Jobs, we'll see which positions that you've selected, and we'll do our best to see what we have open in your preferred location. And it doesn't always work out, I would say. There are times when there's just nothing available, right? And we try to match based on just how well you did in the interview process, right? You get scores throughout. If you scored the best, we try and match you with the location that you really wanted. If you're further down, those locations might have been taken already. And so what I would say to some folks, especially for our, well, for everybody. So, you know, you have the best chance of getting a position with OSI if you click every single location, right? If you are willing to go to Missouri, to North Dakota, if you are willing to go to any of those locations, mark that down. It is more likely you'll get matched with something. But on the same thought, if you are an experienced agent and you're trying to lateral over from another agency and you're not willing to take a location, don't click it, because we will try and match you with that, and because we're going by what OSI needs, you know, our priority fills. So if we have a position open and you said that you were willing to take it, I would say definitely California is one of our toughest to fill. We're going to try and match you with that position first. So if you're not willing to take it, don't mark it. Okay, so once we've matched you with a location, we'll move on to the processing of all your paperwork. We're going to start your medical exam, which you'll get scheduled for you to go do, as well as a drug test. And then we'll initiate your suitability review. So our suitability is different from a background investigation. So your clearance investigation is one thing, and then your suitability investigation with OSI is a separate process. We're going to be talking to your colleagues, your neighbors, your roommates, your spouse, to determine whether we think you're a good fit for a law enforcement position. We're looking for anything that could preclude you from being a good agent. So anything that you could be blackmailed for, any gambling problems, any foreign ties, significant drug use, anything that we think like, yes, this would compromise their ability to testify in a court of law. So once you pass that suitability review and we get the thumbs up, then we can initiate your onboarding process. So we work through the Air Force Personnel Center, which is the big Air Force center that processes all the orders, moves people around, and we will move you to the location in which we matched you. We pay for the move for everybody, so entry level and journeyman. Interns, we do not pay. We pay you a salary, but we don't pay you to move you to your location. And we will move you there before you go through training. So that's one question I get all the time. We will move you no matter what. If you're a lateral or entry level, we'll get you to your location first, settle your family, get them in school, whatever you need to do, and then we'll send you through any training that you still need. Okay, so in terms of timeline, right, next most asked question, on average, it takes about 9 to 12 months. And typically, for lots of different reasons, right, our PACs and PSIPs, our entry-level folks, usually have a timed start date. So we're trying to start you as soon as graduation happens. So we'll advertise in October, September, October, and then we'll try and bring you on board in the summer. So typically we have about that amount of time to get you on board. Our developmentals, if you're outside of that PAC program, that takes about 9 months. And our laterals, it can be as short as 6 months, but up to 9 months. So that I would plan on that, kind of just depending on the holidays, right? We're the government too, so we're a little bit slower over Christmas and Thanksgiving, a little bit faster other times. But our goal is to get you on between 6 and 9 months. So the reasons we do see delays, and so you may say, yeah, you know, I'm in the process now and I haven't gotten through, are typically these waivers that we have to get. So for entry level, for our interns and our entry level, typically these are not a problem. It's more likely that you will encounter this as someone coming from another agency, or if you've separated from OSI and you're coming back. We do have to get a 180-day waiver, and that's just a restriction that the government has. You know, if you're jumping from one position in the government to another, they want to make sure that, you know, we're not, especially as a senior position, so GS-13 is considered a senior position in the government, that you're not retiring and then coming right back into a position that maybe you helped create. So we do waivers for those, as well as an age waiver if you're over the age of 37. So for everybody, the federal law is that you have to be under the age of 37 to come on as a federal law enforcement officer. If you are over the age of 37, you can get a waiver if you are a veteran. And so that's what we do for our folks who are veterans. The other option is if you're lateraling from another agency and you started there before 37. So, and we can talk about that if anyone has any questions. The other reason for a delay is just requirements of the position. Let's say you said, I only want this one specific location, and we might have it coming open, but it's not coming open until the summer. Or, you know, you have a specialty, like you're a polygrapher or a cyber person. Maybe that position might require some additional training, or again, doesn't come open quite right away, or the position's not ready for you to go into. Maybe it's a brand new position. Lots of different reasons, but usually it's related to that position. But happy to answer questions about timelines for anyone who's on the line. I think I just have another couple slides. So frequently asked questions, kind of across the board. Number one, just what kind of person are you looking for? So for our laterals, right, we're looking for 1811 experience. So we need experience in OSI. Because of our makeup in terms of active duty and civilians, we do have a lot of folks who are active duty military that may not have the years of experience. They have Air Force time, whereas they have military time, but they may not have investigator time. So for our 1811s coming in, we are looking for people that can, you know, hit the ground running. We're looking for you to be a worker bee and run cases and be able to help. In terms of entry level, what are we looking for? I think I covered it before with the backgrounds. We are looking for folks of all different degrees. But to do well in the process, we are looking for, you know, academic success, you know, indications that, you know, you really want to be in law enforcement. So, you know, we've seen on your resume that you have done internships, or you have done extracurriculars that really well in law enforcement or counterintelligence. People that have languages or have traveled around the world. So we're looking for people who have a wide range of skills. So there's not just one thing we're looking for. And typically I'll get that from a lot of our entry level who have applied several times and they just haven't gotten anything back. And it's not you. Our process is very competitive. We get thousands of applicants. And for our entry level, you know, we're only hiring a certain number of them per year. So I would just focus on, you know, making sure your resume is in the right format, federal resume format, and having, you know, some mentors look at it for you. Okay, for our entry level, I do get this question. So am I joining the military? You are not, but you are working for the military. So you are not enlisting, you are joining to work as a civilian for the military. But when I say you are working for the military, I mean to say you will be in a military structured organization. So we still have officers who are in charge of our units. We still have a lot of military requirements that we do. Often we'll get called to do specialized training with our host wing. We'll often have to, you know, deal with the military. You're gonna have to learn all the acronyms, learn kind of all the different ways that the Air Force is set up and how we work, right? Because you're going to have to be asking questions and interviewing people based on that. So you won't be joining the military. And then what is your workday like? I get this question all the time. And there is no one answer, right? Your workday is different every day. And I would say that's probably part of the reason that I love this job, is that every day is something new. You know, you're not doing the same repetitive thing. Every investigation is different. You know, every time you go down that path to deciding the next step of an investigation, it's going to be different. You're going to deal with different people, different subjects, different witnesses. But typically you can expect that you'll have, you know, an 8 to 10 hour workday, and you will be actively working your investigations or pursuing leads in terms of intelligence collection for our counterintelligence mission. But like every government office, we are paperwork heavy. So everything you do, as opposed to TV, we do have to document. So there's a lot of report writing. We are looking for folks who have mastered that. And so you will certainly be recording and documenting everything you do. Okay, next question for civilians. Do you deploy? So this is an interesting question because previously civilians did deploy. And then now we've gone through kind of a different phase where it's not mandatory for civilians, but you can volunteer for a deployment. But that's always up for change, right? You work for the military. So there could be opportunities where the military is activated to do certain things, and we need our civilians to support that. So you will sign mobility agreements, and some positions that we have are EE, meaning emergency essential, that you would be required to do something to support the military in a contingency situation. And then will I have to move? So the answer is yes, but we strive to have our civilians stay in place a little bit longer than our active duty. So typically the one assignment would be about 3 years long. Your first assignment typically is 3 years long, although it can be a little bit longer. And that's because of funding. So Big Air Force only wants to move civilians every 3 years. So that's the soonest you can move, but typically you could probably stay in place up to 5 years. We do move people around, and you are on a mobility agreement. And we move people for lots of reasons, right? We want to develop you for promotion. You know, we need people in certain places. We want to make room for brand new entry-level people. And we want to make sure that we're creating a well-rounded agent and somebody that can operate as you move along in your career in lots of different areas of OSI. So there's lots of different reasons you could move. Right. So I wanted to go over this just very quickly, and this is for both for our entry level and for our laterals. So some of the challenges, and we can talk about this. If anyone has questions in the at the end part when answering questions, please let me know. But long hours. So I know people say it, but especially in your first few years, you will be working law enforcement. So crimes happen all times of the day, weekends, Sunday morning. You will be paid law enforcement availability pay, which is an additional percentage of your pay to be available all the time. So if you're working cases and you need to be called in at midnight to work a crime scene, then you can be called in. And often, you know, investigations don't follow a routine path. You know, you might get a call at 3 in the afternoon that a key witness is now available to talk to. And you have a small window, right? And you need to interview that person right now. So your day might be extended. So the hours are a little bit unpredictable. I talked about this already, admin versus operational time. We all love to do this stuff in the movies where you're running around doing undercover work and doing surveillance, but in reality, 80% of your time is going to be spent on report writing and documenting what you're doing, and then about 20% of your time is on the opposite. I should have that switched on the screen. Realities of the profession. So this is a law enforcement organization. So if you are not sure about law enforcement and you have not experienced it before, let me tell you, when you think through the actual crimes that are happening, right? Child molestation, rape, homicide, you are meeting people, witnesses, subjects, victims on the very worst day of their lives. And you are taking on their emotional baggage. You are going to be talking to them. They're going to be emoting, or all of their feelings. And you'll be dealing with that on a daily basis. Child pornography is one that people really struggle with. So if you know about it ahead of time and say, look, I know I'm getting into this, but I want to make a difference and this is where I want to be, that's fine. I want to make sure that I talk to our entry-level folks and our interns and make sure that they understand and just think through that, right? Because it can take a toll on you after a while. It's a lot to deal with on a regular basis. So just think about it a little bit before you apply. I just want to put that warning out there. Additional duties, so OSI, like all other agencies, there's additional things to do, right? You have to count all the evidence, you have to count all the guns, you have to keep track of all your funds. And so there's a lot of that admin time built in there in terms of doing additional things, but that's with every agency. Initial learning curve. So I'd like to say this for some of our laterals too, or some of our retiring and our separating agents. So, when you're in school, this is for my college kids, and your freshman year is awful, right? Because you're having to learn how to study, you're having to learn how to write reports, write papers. You're having just to learn how to do school, right? Like you're having to figure it out. And it takes you, 10 days, 2 weeks to write one paper. And then senior year, you've got it down, right? You get a 20-page paper, you're like, I need 4 hours, a couple Red Bulls, right? And I've got that knocked out. So that is the same thing for learning a new job. And I would say that the first 6 months, year, 18 months is like that. You're having to learn everything from scratch. Right? If you need to do a lineup, you have to look it up exactly in the regulations, how to do a lineup. I need to have this many pictures of this many people, and they need to look like this. And this is the kinds of questions I need to ask. And so once you've got it down and you've gone through that learning portion, it's much easier, but in the first couple of years, it is very difficult. And it's difficult sometimes for our people who are coming from other agencies as well, because you're learning all of the OSI stuff. So sometimes I think people walk in from HSI or from the Marshals or the Border Protection, and they're like, I've done law enforcement, I know this stuff. But UCMJ and the Air Force and the military, they have their own set of rules and requirements. And so you're on the same learning curve as the entry-level folks. So just recognize that, give yourself a little grace, and just think about that. So it goes for our military structure. So some of our laterals and people who are coming from other agencies really struggle with this. So in the military, we have a rank system where we have our military officers who are in charge, because that's their job as an officer, is to be in charge, and they're designed to be leaders. And so oftentimes it does not matter that they have had 0 experience in law enforcement. They will still be in charge of you because it's a military organization. And so what happens a lot is our folks from other agencies will come over and they've got 15, 20 years of law enforcement experience. And they've got somebody who has no idea what they're doing in charge. And that is really hard. And I think saying it out loud and talking about it is the first step, right, of the program. But I think that is something to identify as something people deal with. The same thing happens with our folks who are OSI agents currently, and maybe they were a certain grade or rank in the military as an OSI agent, and they're coming back as a civilian. So our civilians don't have rank, it's by position. So if you're in a position with authority, you'll have that authority, but otherwise you are a worker bee as a GS-13. And then the last thing on this part is just probation for experienced transfer agents. So we get this question a lot. So if I transfer from another agency, I know law enforcement, do I have to be on probation? I'm a returning retiree. So yes, you do still go through probation. We still mark you off. You will likely get an abbreviated version of the probation, but we still have to go through the process of marking you off on all of the skills to ensure that you are trained to the level that all of the other OSI agents are in terms of credentialing. So it's really a credentialing issue, and we can talk through that once you come on if you have any questions. All right, so this is my last portion for our experienced agents, and this is really for our people who are retiring and coming back or separating. They'll apply and then not hear back and be like, oh my goodness, I was already an OSI agent. What's going on? So a couple things. So make sure that your application is specific to the vacancy announcement. So let's say, and I'll talk about this later, but we have a fraud vacancy announcement coming up in about 2 weeks. So let's say we post a fraud vacancy announcement on USA Jobs, and you write your resume, and most of your time you've been working counterintelligence or criminal investigations, or you have done a lot of leadership jobs, right? And you've been in, a senior enlisted leader with OSI or a program manager. Sometimes the items on your resume will not translate well because when they're going through your resume, trying to determine whether you're qualified for the job, they're looking for very specific terms. So look at the vacancy announcement, and in the requirements section or preferred section, it'll say, hey, looking for people with fraud acquisition experience, looking for this, looking for that. And so if you've done that in your career, maybe it's only been one assignment or 2 assignments, make sure you highlight that and really give us a lot of detail about what you've done in that area. So explain which complex cases you've done, who you worked with, how many cases you've run in that area. So that'll help to determine whether you're qualified for that type of job. So when we advertise, we may have a counterintelligence job or a criminal violent crimes position. Write your resume so that you're highlighting those things. And then post all the required documents, which I talked about earlier. So make sure you're uploading, your CITP certificate, any certificates that you have. If you have any fraud experience and you've gotten maybe some fraud certifications, upload your transcripts, upload your vet's preference forms. Make sure you have all of them ready on a folder on your desk, ready to upload. Don't do it on the day of, because what happens is we'll post and then we'll set the limit for the vacancy announcement at maybe 100 applications, and we'll hit that limit by midnight. So you've only got like a few hour window to apply. So just be ready to do it and do it as soon as it posts. So there's no direct hire process. A lot of people ask me, hey, I already work for OSI, or I'm a 14 with HSI. What's the process for like a lateral? I just want to do like the direct hire process. So we do not have a process like that. And that's based on our accepted service. We do have to have a competitive process through USA Jobs. So you must apply through USA Jobs to be eligible for a position with OSI. I would say that if you're an OSI agent already, your resume will read well if you're looking for a GS-13 job, but you still have to go through the process just like everybody else. And then lastly, just invest time in the resume. This is absolutely the most important document. This is what our HR staff is looking at to determine if you're even qualified. You're not even going to get to the interview. So some people are like, oh, I'm just going to put it in and then I'm going to show them where it's at. I'm going to show them in the interview how amazing I am. Do not do that. Make sure that you're telling us in your resume. Be specific about the cases and show us what you did. Don't talk about what your team did. So if you're a retiring officer, if you're retiring, master sergeant, oftentimes our OPR and EPR bullets will say what the team accomplished. And that does not help us. And that does not help our HR staffers. talk about what you've accomplished, what cases you've run, you know, your recoveries, maybe your numbers of convictions, that kind of thing. Be specific. Do a chronological resume, meaning what you're doing now backwards. Don't start from when you graduated high school or college. That's confusing for everybody. Make sure your CITP date is on there. So we're looking for that to see if you're qualified, especially for these GS-13 jobs that are going to be posted, and CITP is a requirement. Make sure that you have your starting SF50 and current SF50 from whatever job you're in if you're coming over as a lateral. And I covered this about complex investigations. Show us in your resume what kind of investigations you've run. So we're not looking for managers. In OSI, GS-14s and 15s are managers. So we're looking for doers. Okay, so my plan is to post this recording and we'll have it on YouTube. But if for whatever reason you want to share it with somebody or look over, we have one from I think a year ago up on our YouTube page, as well as a number of other podcasts and recruiting documents up on our recruiting toolbox. So if you go to the OSI page, you can find that. So there's a good QR code that'll take you there. Plus across social media, you can contact me on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to kind of direct message. Emails sometimes get lost. So if you have any questions, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. So that concludes my portion of the brief. I probably went a little bit longer than I had planned, but now I'm going to move over to answering questions. So if you did have a question, just drop it in the chat. My plan would be I'll just scroll back through and see if there's any questions that were answered while I was talking, and I'll just start from the beginning and I'll hang on until I've answered all the questions. So if you've gotten everything that you need from this briefing, feel free to drop off. You don't have to stay on or just stay on as long as you feel as though you need to. So thanks to everyone for joining us if you drop off. Okay, so I'm going to get started with the questions. I'm going to just start here and make sure this is the first one. All right, so this question, is a non-degree holder a non-starter for consideration? For example, I have a long business corporate background, experience, and no degree. So a degree is not required for a position with OSI. You can qualify on just experience. But what I would say, it is very difficult because many, especially if you're entry level, most of our people have a degree of some sort. And so in terms of just competitiveness, I would say that it's a lot harder, but you can do it. So you can still apply. The only time that it'll give you any problem is when you are trying to qualify for a certain grade based on experience. So let's say you're brand new entry level and you're trying to qualify for a GS9, and maybe you need to have a master's, right, to qualify at that level, and you forget to put your transcripts up. That could be a problem, right? But otherwise, you don't have to have a degree to qualify for OSI.
Excuse me, Agent Holland.
Yes.
It won't let me use the chat, so I was just seeing if I could ask you a question.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I work in local law enforcement now, but I'm also a TFO. Do you guys consider TFO time?
Not in terms of, so yes, in terms of experience, absolutely. Mm-hmm. It makes your resume stand out. But in terms of calculating 1811 time experience, you have to have it on your SF50 to show that you worked 1811 time to qualify at certain grades.
And then if you have a VA rating, since I was prior service, does your VA rating play a role for your physical at all?
For your physical? So not as long as you can pass the physical. So if you have a VA rating, that's fine. And that's good. Make sure that it's adjudicated and uploaded. As long as you can pass our medical exam, it should not play a role.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, so what steps should be taken to be successful in FLETC, and how difficult is it? So FLETC is law enforcement training, right? You need to have good physical fitness. If you go to the FLETC website, they actually have information there about what the physical fitness test is. I would say if you are familiar with the military physical fitness, it's very similar. And they even give you time to improve. So if you get there and you aren't meeting the right level, you can continue to practice and move on. So I wouldn't say it's that difficult as long as you have like a basic level of physical fitness. I passed it, so it couldn't be that hard. But it is physical in general, right? So there's like grappling and running and driving fast cars, right? You're having to do all of those things. So I would say it is a very physical training. But to be successful physically, I would say that, and then just it's also academic, right? So study hard, learn good study skills. Okay, question, can I select the assignment or is it at the discretion of the Air Force? Do you have overseas assignments? So yes, we have overseas assignments. We try to only put our brand new people in stateside assignments. Typically won't do overseas right away unless you're coming over as a lateral, that's possible. You can select your assignments in USA Jobs when you're applying. Click on the locations you're interested in. Sometimes they're not going to be available. And I think I talked about that a little bit. So you just have to be open. The best, the best way to do it is to click that you will go everywhere. Then you have more likely of a chance to go somewhere. So if you're the only one that says they're willing to go to Barksdale, Louisiana, then we'll choose you, right? But most people are putting down that they want to go to Texas or Florida, and so, or Colorado. And so it's more competitive, right? You're going to be competing with more people for those places. All right, with PSIP, when do you have to apply by and when people usually hear back about being accepted? So typically you apply in September for a start date in June-ish. And you should hear back before Christmas. So if you are getting accepted or you've been considered for an interview, you'll hear back before Christmas because that's typically the date they need to start processing. So if you haven't heard back yet, likely you probably haven't progressed to that next stage. I mean, maybe they might do another interview, another set of interviews, but likely if you haven't heard anything before Christmas, then you probably haven't gone on to the next stage. Okay, will you hire civilian agents over 37? So the answer is yes, if you are a veteran. So in no, if you have no military time. So we are restricted, you can't be over 37. But if you're a veteran, we can apply for a waiver. We'll consider that. So make sure that you mark that in the questionnaire when you do apply through USA Jobs. Also, what step in the application process in OSI, what step? What step in the application process in OSI for the PSIP internship? So the PSIP internship, just to cover that one more time, is posted on USA Jobs, typically in September. So the one for this year has already gone by. And so if you're interested in, you'll have to wait till next September. And it's posted on USA Jobs. You apply, you go through all of the same processes. So you'll have a resume look, you'll do an interview, do suitability, all the same things. And then they'll place you in one of the OSI offices to do the internship. If you're talking about which step in the process are they at for the internships right now, I think that they're just finishing the interviews. So they should be making selections soon. Okay, it says, do you take appointments over Teams to talk to applicants and people are interested? We don't. So we just have such a volume of people that typically we try and answer all of the questions in these information sessions that we just don't have the manpower to do individual discussions. But if you shoot me a note on LinkedIn, I can try to answer it individual. Just I can't promise the timeline. For PACs, when are applicants usually contacted for interviews? What makes a competitive candidate coming out of college? So PACs, typically that's about October. So they all have been contacted for interviews by now. So if you haven't gotten an interview request, that just means that you didn't make it through to the next round. And then what makes a competitive candidate coming out of college? So I think I covered a little bit, just academic success, right? That you've shown us that you can do well when you put your mind to something. You can study hard, get good grades, that kind of thing. That you've done internships in law enforcement. That makes you competitive because we know you know what law enforcement's about. And you kind of gone out of your way to get those internships. Extracurriculars, showing us that you are a leader, right? You could be a president of your fraternity. You could have been president of the debate team. Show us that maybe you've taken on initiative. Other people believe in you, want to follow you. That makes you look good on your resume. Languages, any certificates, cyber certificates, all of those things. And then make sure that you're talking about what you've done. You know, don't just list, you know, Applebee's waitress, 3 years while I was in college. Don't just say that. Say, you know, team leader for, you know, large staff, right? You know, say what you did. Did you do all of the schedules? Did you, you know, have to do discipline? Did you have to, you know, deal with HR things? Talk about it, right? Even if you think it's not related, it could relay well on your resume. Okay, is there a recommended application window for entry-level positions? So yes, the PAC program is in October. Our other developmental programs are just kind of ad hoc through the year. Typically it'll be on the other end. So the last one that we did was in the spring. So I would suggest, I would think that if we're gonna do another one, it'll probably be in the spring because our PAC one was in the fall. They're kind of opposite of each other. Will the statement of service be a sufficient alternative for an SF50 for active duty retiring? I will have to look that up. So if you don't have an SF50 and you're retiring from active duty, then I apologize if that was confusing. So if you don't have an SF50, that is fine. That's mostly for our laterals who are trying to certify and qualify on their 1811 time. So if you're coming from active duty, yes, please, a statement of service, right? D214, and talk about like what career field you were in, so we can kind of look and see what your qualifications were. All right, will there be a time period as a current military OSI agent planning to separate from active duty to apply? So yes, so fingers crossed, we have a vacancy announcement that's gonna come out in about 2 weeks. We're aiming for 20 December. It could slide a day or two, but it's in the works. It's already kind of, we've hit the button on play, right? So hopefully on 20 December, we will have an announcement. I think we're gonna hire for about 10 positions for various procurement fraud locations. So watch for that one. After that, we hope to do a counterintelligence only announcement. So probably right after the new year, I would guess. Okay, so if I'm already an enlisted OSI agent looking at applying for a civilian position, is the degree still a requirement? So no, the degree is not a requirement for an OSI position. It was, like I was saying, it's a requirement to, if you're trying to qualify at a certain grade, it is a requirement. But I would say that it is harder because you are competing across the board with other people who have their degrees. So my recommendation is to apply because you have a better chance of getting picked up with your degree. You'll be more competitive. The next opening for entry level, that's in the spring. we think. Usually they're on opposite ends, so we had one in the fall, so probably in the spring. To be considered for a 13 position, do you have to have any required FLETC or be in a current 1811 series billet, or can you be a 13 in a related field? So you cannot be a GS13 in a related field. So if you are a 132 and you're an Intel officer and you want to be an agent, you can't lateral over into a GS13 1811 position. So the requirements for the job is that you have 52 weeks at the next lowest level, so that would be a GS12, working as an 1811. And then typically the vacancy announcements will have a requirement of FLETC or CITP as a basic prerequisite. So let's say you're working Army CI and you've been through CITP, you're still gonna struggle becoming on as a 13. So make sure that you write in your resume all of the things that you've done if they're investigatively related. So I'm not saying it's impossible. You'll still be looked at by the HR team, but it is more difficult if you're coming from a different series. So just make sure if you're in a series with another agency and you're working as an 1811 and you're doing all the 1811 things, make sure that your resume just really reflects that. Because the easiest thing to do, right, for our HR, and I'm just talking purely on an HR human level, right, is to look at someone's SF50 and see if they're working on as an 1811, right? Then you automatically know that they have had all the training and all the experience. So if they're looking at a resume where you say I am a criminal investigator, but you're actually in a different series, it's much more difficult to qualify you. Okay, this says, I have a degree in business and I speak foreign languages. Can I apply for entry level and get stationed overseas? Typically will not station you overseas if you're brand new entry level. And that's only because it is very, number one, you're just learning to be an agent. So everyone goes through our FLETC training and goes through probationary training if you're entry level. So kind of like a Marine is a Marine, right? We're going to teach everyone how to shoot guns and everyone how to do criminal investigations, because for OSI, we believe that if you can investigate and you can interview people and collect evidence, you can do that both for criminal investigations, like a drug case, right? And an espionage case. The actual functions that you would do in each case are the same. It's just a classified case versus an unclassified case. So when you're coming in as entry level, we're going to be teaching you how to be a criminal investigator first. Then once you learn all that and you say like, hey, I speak 5 languages, I'd love to go overseas, I'd love to do the counterintelligence mission, then yes, we will get you somewhere and put you into that mission. All right, so next question says, are lateral GS-13s considered for overseas assignments as an initial duty? So yes. If you're coming as a lateral GS-13 and you have the background that we might need, a language or some kind of specialty, and we're trying to fill something overseas, then yes, you can go overseas in your first assignment if you're coming as a lateral. And that's just because, like I was saying, as an entry level, you're still learning the job. Whereas if you're coming as a lateral, we're assuming that you've been working in law enforcement, you've been working in counterintelligence, and you have that background and you can kind of pick up and go overseas. Okay, the next question says, is the application process for military OSI agents the same as for external applicants? Yes. So I think I answered that in my one slide, but there is no direct hire authority. If you are a current OSI agent, you have to apply through USA Jobs just like everybody else. Make sure that you have your veterans preference documents ready and upload them with your application. That's really important. How strict is the medical exam process, and would having a disability, one that doesn't really affect my job performance, impact eligibility for the role? So I don't know if I can give the medical exam, like a rating on how strict it is. But they are looking for certain things, right? We want to make sure that our agents coming in are, um, physically fit enough to do the job. You have to be able to fire weapons. You have to be able to go through training where you're grappling someone to the ground. You have to have, your color vision. You can't have certain vision issues. You can't have certain hearing issues. You have to be able to, I think, lift 50 pounds of your head. You can't have any heart problems. You can't be on medications that have to be refrigerated, where you couldn't go overseas, at the last minute. So there are certain things on that medical exam that you do, but if you can pass it, and then you can pass through FLETC, then you can work as an agent. So that's the exam. There's no out-front, things that I can say right now about it's super strict or not super strict. But if your disability does not impact your ability to perform the job, then you should be fine to go through the process. Okay, I'll be graduating in August 2025. How soon can I apply? Do I have to wait? So yes and no. If we have a developmental announcement in the spring, I would apply to that one because it takes maybe another 6 to 9 months to bring on. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for the one in the fall. Okay, this question says, is there any admin time or leave given after completing FLETC to have enough time to go back to the attachment? So yes, yeah, they'll give you plenty of time. I mean, there'll be a certain amount of time for you to travel back to your, if you're talking about just like leave, like a week or two to go visit your family, yes, you can just coordinate that with your supervisor if you have the leave to take. Oftentimes, if you're a brand new civilian, you're not accumulating a ton of leave. So if you haven't worked for the government before, typically every 2 weeks, you will get, when you're first starting as a DS7, you'll get 4 hours of leave every 2 weeks. So every month you'll get 1 day off. So let's say you start going to FLETC and it's about 4 months long, you might have 4 days of leave that you can take. So your supervisor will say, it looks like on the books you have 4 days, you can take 4 days. So it all kind of just depends on how much leave you have to take.
Good morning, Jennifer. I don't know if the chat is working, but I also joined late. I don't know if you already answered this question. For those folks that applied back in May and got a referral for the OSI communications, are they going to be eventually heard something, whether they got selected or not selected eventually, or do we just keep the waiting game?
Yeah, so if you applied back in the spring to our developmental announcement, you will eventually get a notice whether you were selected or not selected. So we're still kind of going through our process. We're about at the end of it. But yes, at the end of it, when they close the announcement and you weren't selected, you'll get a notice, so you'll know for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, let me work down. Okay, so the next question says, is a 180-day waiver only for those retiring or also for those separating prior to retirements? Yes, for both. It's for both. So it's a waiver for people retiring and for those separating. So it's just anybody who is going from a military job into a government job. There's typically a 180-day waiting period, but we typically can get a waiver for that. So you can retire, separate, and then start working. Typically, other government jobs, you'll have to do that waiting period. Right, so next question says, is there a good resource to understand what a federal resume looks like? Yes, so if you go to USA Jobs, they post on LinkedIn all the time. They actually have a federal resume workshop that I would recommend. A lot of times you can just click into Google federal resume format and it'll give you an example. If you hang on for the end of this, I can see if I can find one and send it to you. Okay. Oh, actually, a question. I think you work for OSI, so I will send you an email. All right, so with the 9 to 12 month process, when should a retiring military agent start the application? Also, are desired jobs taken into consideration, CI, poly, SAP, during the process? Lastly, will previous experience in some of these areas assist with the hiring process? And what's the likelihood of getting back into that focus area? First location. So yes. So one thing about retiring and separating folks, you do have to apply within 120 days of your retirement and separation date. You are not eligible if you apply earlier than that. So you need to apply within that window. So I would kind of watch, and whenever you're 120 days out from your final retirement date, then I would go ahead and start applying at that time. Now, OSI hasn't regularly posted positions. You know, sometimes ours can be like 5 and 6 months apart. We're going to try really hard over the next few months to have a better timeline in terms of open vacancies and have one, you know, we're going to have one this month. We'll hopefully have another one next month and the month after that. So we hope to have kind of a regular process very soon. Yes, so if your desired job, you need to apply to the position that you want. So like the next one will be a vacancy for fraud. And if you've already gotten that specialty training within OSI, we're going to try and place you, but likely don't apply to the fraud one. You know, if you have no fraud experience, you might not get selected. But yes, absolutely. Your desired specialty is taken in consideration because that's just like an additional amount of training that we don't have to do. So we try to get you into those positions. And then so we'll try our best. We're looking at your resumes when we're matching you to the positions. So yeah, just make sure your resume reflects all the things that you've done with OSI. Oh, thank you. USA Jobs. Resume Builder is a good start. Absolutely. I would definitely recommend that. Okay, for the PAC program, how long after college are applicants considered? I graduated in 2022 with a BA in History and Security Studies, and I'm currently a Baltimore County police officer. Is it too late for a PAC? You should be able, typically, we are considering you 2 years after graduation date, just because it's a recent college grad program, right? If you're a vet, I think it's up to 6 years we're considering you. So this probably would have been the last year that you would have had a look. So I would recommend applying to the developmental program where we don't really have that 2-year look anymore. So you can be kind of anywhere in your career and come on still as a developmental entry level. It says, should I only apply to PSIP? I would apply to everything that you're eligible for. Okay, it says, understanding that OSI agents need to move and sign a mobility agreement, is it possible to stay at Oconus a long term? So yes, I would say you probably are not guaranteed to stay in one location, but if you enjoy living overseas, you can move around to different Oconus locations. So let's say you want to live in Germany, and then you move to, England for a little while, and then you move to Japan for a couple of years. Like, yes, but if the plan is to come on and stay for 20 years in one location, that's probably not going to happen. Typically, there is like a 5-year window for living overseas, and it has to be renewed each time somebody stays longer than that. So we try to move you out of there, and that's for development as well, and to give that opportunity to other people. So yes and no, kind of depends. Okay, this question says, do the long hours make it unlikely to have a good work-life balance? So Yes and no. I would say that your first couple years, and this is Jen Holland's opinion, and you can talk to different agents and see kind of what they think. But I'd say the first couple years, it is difficult. So if you're coming into it with very small children or, a very active social life, right? Like your first year and a half to 2 years, you will be first going through all your training, so you'll be out of town, but also you'll be working longer hours, right? Because you're trying to get yourself off probation. And so a lot of times when maybe say there's a crime scene or there's an after hours interview or surveillance, you'll be working that, but also because you're learning, right? It could be that maybe it's not even your investigation, but they say, hey, this guy needs to get off probation. I'm going to invite them along on the surveillance. So it is hard when you're learning, but you can easily, as a civilian agent, move into a specialty that you can have a great work-life balance. So I would say within OSI, you can work in fraud, you can work in our special projects, you can do counterintelligence or cyber or polygraph, where you're not working late evening hours or weekend hours. You maybe have to travel a little bit, but you can generally kind of manage your time and your family. So, and I think that's probably how it is at other agencies as well. And I would say that's kind of your first couple of years when you're learning it is tough. Okay, thanks Sandra for answering that question. Does OSI offer take home and assign vehicles to their agents? We do not, and that is an Air Force policy, not a law enforcement OSI policy. The Air Force does not allow people to have cars for personal use. So we do have assigned vehicles or office assigned vehicles. So we have like a motor pool, right? Where you check the car out when you need to use it for work. But there's not going to be a car that you're going to take home every day unless you're the on-call agent. So typically they'll designate one agent who's on call for the week. And then that person gets to take it back and forth. But they're very, very strict about it in the Air Force. So you usually can't stop and usually can't, have your kids in the car, that kind of thing. So it is not like other agencies. Perfect. I love when people answer my questions too. Thank you. It's like my crowdsourcing. All right. So it says, are there any OSI PAC representative contacts to reach out for further information? I think Mike put that. If you drop your email in the chat, I can try and find somebody to reach out to. Okay, so an active duty statement of service, advice for the SF50. So yes, yeah, I think I cleared that up earlier. Apologies for that misunderstanding. Are there any updates as far as the most recent PAC listing? So yes, the PAC listing has already been posted and we've already initiated interviews. So and we're working through the interviews right now. So if you were not contacted for an interview, then likely you didn't make it through that stage of the process. But if you were contacted for an interview, just hold tight. We're still kind of working through those. Hopefully we'll get it done before Christmas and let you know. Okay, question. Will an applicant learn if they are no longer being considered for a job vacancy announcement? I didn't receive any email notification after completing the psychological testing. Is there a waiting period for an applicant to wait prior to applying for another job? Okay, so the job that you applied to is likely closed. So that looks like it was in October of 2023. So likely that one has been closed. I don't know about getting a notice from USA Jobs. We have been working on our touch points to ensure everyone gets a notice from USA Jobs. So it could have just been kind of in that gap period where they weren't going through quite the way they should have. So yes, typically we are going to contact you and let you know that you just were no longer considered for the position. But there is no waiting period. So you can apply to all the positions that are open. They're all processed separately. Please do apply. Okay, question says, I only saw one journeyman advertisement in 2024. I think it was springtime, right? Will there be more advertisements? So yes, so we're trying to be better at that. It's been difficult. Uh, just for everyone, that the one that came out in the spring, we only had it open for, I think, 12 hours and we got 1,700 applications. And so that is a huge volume for our small office. So we kind of took it in little pieces and have been processing them since then. And so we're about finished with that announcement. But yes, our plan is to have more regular announcements. And the plan is, like I said, we're going to have one coming out in 2 weeks, December 20th, hopefully. And then maybe perhaps once a month or every couple of weeks after that. So we're trying to get better at that. Take home car, I answered that one. Is there a time period as a current military agent planning to separate from active duty to apply? So 120 days from your date of separation and retirement. That's when you can apply. When is the experienced agent announcement? 20 December, fingers crossed, a day or two around that. I will be 40 when I retire next summer. Age waivers common. Yes, so we do apply for age waivers. It does delay it a little bit because we have to write it up and it has to go up for approval. But if you're over 40 and you have all the right experience that we're looking for, then we do apply for waivers. Good morning. Is there a way to be notified of USA Jobs announcements to make sure we don't miss it? So yes, two things. So in USA Jobs, go in and search for Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or AFOSI, and save your search. And then it'll email you every time, kind of like, you know, in Zillow, right? Where you like search for a house and you put in all your specifications and it'll email you every time a house comes open. Similar to that, they have the same kind of technology. So if you do that in USA Jobs, you should get an email. Make sure it's marked not junk, you know, in your folders. The other way is just to follow on LinkedIn. I try to post as soon as I can when I know it's coming, to let people know across social media. Let's see. When's the next entry level in the spring? Explain how the bidding process or length of time it takes to get an overseas assignment. So yeah, so like once you, like I said, if you're an experienced agent and you're coming over, it's possible for you to go overseas in your first assignment. It's just a matter of looking at your resume and making sure you have the right kind of background for that job. It's just kind of case by case. If you're entry level though, the way it works is we'll assign you to your first job. You'll get trained. Let's say you're going to be assigned to Texas, right? Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. So you go to your first job, you go get trained at FLETC, you come back, you kind of do your 18 months of probationary time. Typically the Air Force won't move you until the third year. So kind of at the second year, 2.5 year mark, you can start engaging with our assignments officer. Typically we'll email out to the entire OSI and say, here are the open positions, and we'll have a big listing, and then you'll just submit your bid on what your location, and you can make the case for why you want that position. So if you speak lots of languages, maybe you've lived there before, you can explain why you'd be a good fit, and then our assignments folks will match you with that location. So that's an internal, and you apply. The internal folks have like the first dibs over external. Do you know when we'd be contacted for interviews, the most recent palace inquiry? So you should have already, if you did not get contacted for an interview, then likely you didn't make it to the next phase. OSI, the green light to continue in the upcoming CR. No, I don't think anyone has gotten any of that information yet. So we're kind of just proceeding. You know, we've all worked in the government for a long time. This happens all the time, right? There could be freezing pauses, but we're gonna just kind of keep going with the hopes that, you know, hiring is just gonna continue and then kind of see how it goes. So we don't have any more information. Next job will be December 20th, we hope. posted for the next announcement. Let's see, with individuals who have been in the process for PCIP, will we hear if we're select or not? So if you have not heard about getting an interview, then likely you are not selected. So typically with the internship program, they do not send a note and tell you like you have not been selected. That only happens with kind of our experienced folks in a different process. So, and that's just based on volume of numbers of applicants. So if you haven't gotten an interview, then likely you didn't move on. Okay, next question says, how does an agent specialize in certain areas, such as investigations and counterintelligence? What is the career path like for someone who enters at entry level? So I think I explained before, so that person that I was talking about that got assigned to Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas, so they would get their assignment there, they'd go to training, come back, get off probation, and let's say they were there and said, you know what, I don't like running drug cases. I really want to work in counterintelligence. I think that was the example. So I really want to work in counterintelligence. So you would reach out to the assignments officer and say like, hey, I really want to work in CI. I want to work counterintelligence. And they could help you figure out which jobs would be the best for you. You can move over to our special projects office. You can move to base CI, JTTF, FPD, all of the different areas that we have within OSI that you would be working counterintelligence. Once you kind of were selected for that position, they look at your background and make sure you had all the required training. So they would put you in courses where you would be learning basic counterintelligence and anything you would need for the job that you're going into. So typically the beginning of your career path will look like that. You'll go and learn criminal investigations first, and then you'll specialize into something. Let's say you want to specialize and become a cyber agent. They will look around and see which positions are opening for those folks. If you have maybe a background in it or just really interested in it, you can be assessed by our program manager to determine whether you would be a good fit. If you are, they'll put you through all the training and get you into one of our cyber positions. So that's how that works. Then you'll have some time where you have an assignment or 2 assignments or 2 different offices where you're just learning your craft. You'll work there for a couple of years or 2 years, and then you can decide if you want to stay in that specialty. You can become a supervisor, you can move to a different specialty. Typically it takes about 10 years or so before you really have the expertise and knowledge that you can look at supervisory positions. But then OSI has a pretty good program where you can move to GS-14, GS-15, and we have 2 SESs within our civilian ranks. So you can elevate pretty quickly within your specialty, depending on kind of what you're interested in. Okay, this question says, I will graduate from college in May of 2025. Some federal agencies encouraged me to start the application process in January. For OSI, do I need to wait to be a graduate in order to apply? No. Or can I start the application? Yes. So since our process takes 6 to 9 months, 9 to 12 months, kind of depending on where you are in the entry level, go ahead and apply before you graduate. And then upload your transcripts that you have now. And then before you are hired on, we'll check your transcripts to make sure you've graduated if you're applying to one of our developmental programs. Good morning. Have there been any updates on the people that have been referred to the May California locations? So yes, if you have not been contacted and you applied in May for a California location, then likely you did not make it through to the next phase. We've contacted everybody that we're going to contact. Okay, the next question says, I applied for the most recent PAC announcement. Would I be able to change locations before being contacted for interviews? So no, whatever you clicked in USA Jobs is what we are going to try and assign you to. And then would I have to provide an SF50 even if I don't have experience? No. So I apologize. I must have confused everybody with that. So if you currently working for the federal government, you need to supply an SF50. If you don't have one, then you don't have to supply it. But the only way you could change locations is if we contact you perhaps and say like, hey, we see that you wanted to go to South Carolina, we're going to match you with this position. And you say, oh, I can't go there anymore. Then maybe we can try and figure out something else. But typically only what you have put in USA Jobs. This question says, if I'm not a current college student and have been a graduate for a few years and am currently local law enforcement, is it still possible to be considered for entry level? Yes. So I would recommend applying to the developmental program. That's the one that you can be hired between a GL7 and a GL12. That's based on your experience in local law enforcement, and that's our entry level program. The PAC program is the only one where you have to have that college within the 2 years. So developmental program is where you should apply. And typically, fingers crossed, that may come out in the spring. What's the timeline like for viewing entry applications after receiving email that your application is still being seen by a person? I would say after you apply, typically you will get an interview, or your resume would have been looked at, and then you would have been, because the next time you're going to be contacted is when you are being requested to do an interview. So typically that takes maybe a month or so, but it just kind of depends. So I think I was saying before with this announcement we did in the spring, we had so many applications, we had to break it out in chunks. So we did like a certain amount 1 month, and then we got through those, and then we did the next chunk. And it took us 6 months to process that announcement. Typically, they're not that large. So if it's a more narrow one where we're looking for just, fraud folks, that might be a lot faster. Typically, it takes less than a month to contact you for an interview. Okay, next question says, would the fraud vacancy announcement in 2 weeks be open to 7s? So no, that's going to be for GS13s with background fraud experience. That will not be open to 12s. This question says, I'm a current college student graduating in May of 2026 with 2 degrees, national security and foreign intelligence. Awesome. I have the ability to graduate early with 1. Will graduating with my 2nd degree impact hiring or pay? No. So if you're qualifying for that position based on that 1 degree, then no. A second degree won't impact it unless you're trying to qualify at a 9 with your master's degree. So if you have your master's and you're trying to qualify at the GS9 level, then maybe that will affect it a little bit. But you can apply with just your bachelor's. This question says, for the federal resume format, I completed an internship with HSI last year. However, I have had another non-law enforcement internship and job since then. Would you recommend I put the HSI internship at the top of my list? Yes. The most relevant and interesting internship that you have, put it at the top. Also, languages, don't bury them at the bottom of your resume. Put them at the top of your resume. That's fantastic. So yeah, most relevant thing, you can look up like a federal resume. There's a guide for kind of highlighting the experience that relates, like relevant experience. There's a few federal ones that you can kind of highlight that. So I will Google how to do that. Okay, so this question says, I'm a firefighter fellowship apprentice and have a background in public safety, supervision, and security. I have a degree in fire service administration along with criminal justice and private security. Would my civilian experience qualify? So it would not qualify for an 1811. Your experience would have, you would qualify for an entry level because you've never done complex criminal investigations at the 1811 in an 1811 type environment. So you would be qualified for entry level. For active duty agents retiring or separating, how early can we begin the application process? 120 days. Yeah, yes, that's the current guideline. 120 days before separation retirement. Could you please clarify how, when applying through the internship paths, an applicant is able to indicate their interest in OSI? There's not a specific announcement for OSI interns, correct? So no, there is a specific announcement for OSI interns. It's on USA Jobs in September, and we'll advertise. It'll say student interns, and under it, it'll say Office of Special Investigations. That's how you know it's for us. Okay, I'm an active duty OSI agent. Is it okay to email you? Yes, please do. Please email me and I can send you a federal resume example. I will also try to post one on LinkedIn for anyone who doesn't have access to email us. So then it'll be available for the public. Are interviews for PSIP still being sent out? They've already sent out all the interview requests. So if you haven't been contacted, you didn't move to the next stage. Thanks, Sandra, for answering that. Would OSI consider a prior enlisted agent for a PAC position? Yes. Yes, if you're qualified, as long as you meet that window where you've gotten your degree in the last 2 years, apply. So yes, we would consider you. How many CI positions do you anticipate to hire after the new year? I think it's around the range of 20, I believe. We talked about it this morning. I think there are about 20 positions that are going to be hired for. Hopefully more. We're trying to free up a few more. Okay, are mental health diagnoses like TBI and PTSD a no-go or frowned upon for these positions? So if you've gotten all clear from your doctor and you can pass a medical exam with OSI and you can perform the duties of the job, then please do apply. If you have a mental health diagnosis, they're taken on a case by case. So there's no one diagnosis where you put it on there and you're immediately disqualified, or during the suitability investigation, they say, oh, this person's not going to be able to do it. It's case by case. It's typically if your mental health condition affects your regular life, it's unmanaged, your friends and family say that it's affected your work life, things like that, where it's something that clearly has taken over your life and that you can't manage it. So if it's something that's managed, typically it'll be considered. So there's not a yes or no answer on that one. Have all interviews for PACs be sent out? Yes, they have. Okay, what would be the best position for someone over 40 with a fire service administration degree? So if you're not a veteran and you can't qualify for a position with OSI as a law enforcement agent, I would look at some of our professional staff positions. We have some fantastic jobs. Typically some of our criminal indexing specialists who are ATL1s who help do support type roles in our offices where you'd be working with agents, typically doing, you know, the indexing of our cases. So you'll be kind of QCing them, helping with evidence, different things like that. So we have those positions, we have Intel analyst positions, we have HR, IT, all of those. Typically they're posted on USA Jobs ad hoc, kind of as they come open, we post them. We have lawyers, all of the professional staff, where you're still a part of the law enforcement team and kind of working with OSI, but you can't, if you're unable to work as an 1811, then that's a really good option. Is there a number of years experience for military OSI agents that makes them competitive with 13? So typically, you know, we are looking for a bachelor's degree. Yeah, I think you listed that there. Typically what we're looking for is about 4 years experience to qualify. So obviously as an enlisted agent, you've, done your probationary time and then worked for a little while. So the 4 years comes into play because we are looking for someone, typically for a civilian, when you come on as a 7, it takes you 4 years to gain the expertise, the subject matter expertise, to become a journeyman 13. And the 13 is the idea that you can operate independently without assistance or supervision. And so we've tried to translate that over into our qualifications for our active duty members. So we're typically looking for that time period of time of experience with OSI. Question, will there be a TSCM position in the next job release? Not that I know about. I have not heard about that recently. So yeah, no, we haven't hired for that probably in about 2 years. So, but I will check and see. Okay, last question. How does one get into an intel analyst or intelligence specialist position? So you can, if you are already working as an intelligence specialist, you can apply to the jobs that we put on USA Jobs. All the time we have intel analysts, as long as you're willing to move and live different places, all over the country, overseas. We'll bring you on as a 132 analyst. If you are entry level and just trying to break into it, my recommendation is to go through big Air Force intelligence career field team. So if you go to AFCS.com, Air Force Civilian Service, it's a great page. It has a ton of information, all the different Air Force careers, and there you can find intelligence is one of the options. Click on it, and there should be information there about who to contact to apply through their programs. Does OSI hire 1801 digital forensics analysts or only 1811? So currently we are only doing 1811 criminal investigator digital forensics agents. I know some other agencies have 1801s doing it. I know they've looked at that in the past. It just hasn't come kind of to fruition. So at the moment, what we're doing is you come on as an 1811. If you show a little bit of interest in becoming a forensics or digital forensics agent, then we'll send you through all the required training. Okay, I think I got to the end of my questions. And make sure there weren't any more raised hands. All right, any more questions? All right, so I'm going to wrap up. If you look for me on LinkedIn, Jen Grant Holland, you can search me, you can ask me some questions there. I'm going to try and post a federal resume. I think that seemed to be something people are interested in today. So thank you for joining us. I hope this was informative. If it was helpful for you, share with your friends. We try to do this kind of every other month, just depending on the schedule. And we do post it on social media when that becomes available. So thanks to everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.